All right, welcome everybody. Let's do this. So, lesson number 7, intermediate factoring technique. So, this technique will be really important for Algebra 2, and this is called factor by grouping. So, before we even start anything, what I'd like you to do is write this in your notes, and pause the video, write this in your notes, and then we'll begin. Okay? So, let's say we want to use factor by grouping for this. Notice how many terms do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. Okay, so let's follow the steps and see what happens. Okay, step number 1. Group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. Put them in parentheses. So basically, all that's asking you to do is to take the first 2 terms, which are right here. So we take these 2 terms and I put parentheses, and then I take the last 2 terms and I put them in parentheses. Okay, great. So now let's write this over again. So what I do is I just write 12x cubed minus 9x squared plus parentheses 4x minus 3. Okay, now let's look at step number 2. It says factor out the GCF from each group. So this is the first group, this is the second group. So we want to take the GCF out from each group. So pause the video. What is the GCF of just this group? And then what is the GCF of just this group? Okay. Now if you want to see the solution, well, what's the GCF of 12 and 9? It's 3. And what's the GCF of x to the 3 and x to the 2? It's x to the 2. And then what we're doing is, we're factoring it out, right? So you divide this, secretly, what are you doing? You're dividing this by, 3x squared, and you're dividing this by 3x squared. I mean, if you could do this in your head, that's good, but if you need to show it, that's all right too. But that's what you're secretly doing, right? So what's 12 divided by 3? That's 4. And then this x to the 3 divided by x squared becomes x. And then this becomes minus 3. Because 9 divided by 3, negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3, x squared just cancels. Okay, so the GCF for the first group is 3x squared, and we're left with the 4x minus 3. What's the GCF of this group? There is no GCF. The GCF is just, it's just 1, right? So if the GCF is 1, we could just put a 1 over here, and then I have 4x minus 3. Okay, now here, we finished step 1, we finished step 2. Now step 3 says factor out the common binomial. The common binomial will be this right here. And what does it mean to be common? Common means they both have it. They both have a 4x minus 3. So what you're allowed to do is, if they both have the same binomial, you're allowed to put one of them over here. And then now what I do is I take this and I take this and I put it over here. And then voila. I factored this original 12x cubed minus 9x squared plus 4x minus 3 into 2 binomials. Okay? And if you're like, oh, Mr. G, what does that mean? Well, if I FOIL this, I better get the top. So let's see over here. Let's see if we just FOIL this for fun. Okay, so let's just check. Right. So let's check. What's 3x squared times 4x? That's 12x cubed. What's 3x squared times minus 3? That's minus 9x squared. 1 times 4x is 4x. 1 times minus 3 is negative 3. And wow, look, this matches the original. Okay? If there's one thing that's a little new, is why do these two just become 1, right? Because of this common binomial. Why are you allowed to just do this to this and then this to this? I'll show you in class. Okay, it's not easy to show in just a video because it'll take a lot of time. But just trust that once you have the common binomial, you're allowed to put it as 1. What I want you to do is, following this idea, I want you to try and do the second one all by yourself, okay? Take your time. Follow the steps, pause the video while I'm doing it, and try and continue as much as you can by yourself, okay? So let's say you're trying to do the problem right now, you pause the video. So let's take a look. What's the first move? We will, same idea from the left. What are we gonna do? Parentheses, 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 okay? Now here, I did an extra step of putting this on the bottom, like of repeating it. You don't have to. Because all you could do is, what's the GCF from this group? It's just x squared. And then parentheses 2x plus 5. Okay? You see how I put this step, I did this step over here. I did this step is over here, but yeah, basically you don't need to do this extra step here. You could just go right into it. You could just parentheses, parentheses, take out the GCF. Okay, so what's the GCF over here? It's plus, what is it? It's plus 3. And then this becomes 2x plus 5. Okay? And notice, what do we have right now? We have that common binomial of 2x plus 5. So what are you allowed to do? You're allowed to, the same way we did it over here, we just put it as 1. You could put this just as one of them, as 2x plus 5. And this is x squared plus 3. Okay? And that's what we did. We factored these 4 terms into 2 binomials. And if you want, you could check it again. And if you check it, when you multiply this or you FOIL this, you should get the original. Okay? What I want you to do is try and do letter C and letter D by yourself, and let's see what happens. Okay? Now, if you want to see the actual solution, now we'll just do it in one shot. So here, what's the first move? Parentheses, 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 parentheses. Okay? Here you take the GCF from this group, which should be 3a squared. Okay? And this will be a minus 1. Okay? What's the GCF of this group? It should be, let's see. How does this one work? 3a cubed, 3a squared. This is 3, right? This is a squared. So I divide this. That's minus 1. Okay, what's this? This is what? Plus 3. And then this becomes 3x minus 4. That's very weird because I don't know why this isn't working. Hold on. Just looking at this problem, not factorable. Okay? Because here, notice that you don't have a common binomial. These two are not the same. So you're not allowed to do any factoring technique with this. It doesn't factor. Okay? Sometimes you just have to trust yourself that you're not allowed to continue further and you can't factor it anymore. What about the next one? This one should be a good one. I didn't plan to give you one that didn't factor. I made a mistake in making the wrong one, but it's okay. The idea is, what do we do? Group, 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 group. Okay, so what's the GCF of this group? It should be 8x squared. And then this should be 3x plus 1. And what's the GCF of this group? It should be 2. So this is a plus 2. And now I get 3x plus 1. And notice these two are the same. So now that these two are the same, I could just say, put them together as 3x plus 1. And I put this as 8x squared plus 2. Okay? And if I want to check it, if I multiply this, it should give me the original. Okay? So just to recap, these are the skills for factor by grouping. And the thing I want you to answer is when to use factor by grouping. Okay? Pause the video and try and think about it. When are you allowed to do this factor by grouping? Okay? And now if you want to see when you're allowed to use it, you have to have 4 terms, right? So notice that you see how I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then here, we were allowed to use factor by grouping here when we got the common binomial. But when we don't have the common binomial, we can't continue to use factor by grouping. Okay? I hope this video helped. What I want you to do is go to Delta Math and practice the assignments there. Practice the factor by grouping assignment. Okay? Enjoy.